Russian soldiers in an APC broke through to the edge of the village and quickly disembarked to begin their assault. But they were intercepted by a Bradley, which started firing at them with precision. After coming under direct fire from the Bradley, the Russian IFV caught fire and soon exploded. It was probably loaded with ammunition that detonated. We cannot be 100% sure, but the explosion was very powerful. Next, the Ukrainian Bradley boldly drives into the village and begins hunting down the soldiers who disembarked from the IFV and are now hiding in abandoned buildings. The powerful fire of the Bradley can pierce even brick walls of buildings. The Russians are unlikely to be able to hide from such fire anywhere. The task of the Ukrainians is to prevent the Russians from establishing a foothold in this village. But the Russians still have the option to use basement areas where the Bradley won't be able to reach them. Bradley's main weapon is a 25mm automatic Bushmaster cannon. But for such a task, something much more powerful is needed. So, to support the Bradley, the 47th Brigade quickly sends in an Abrams tank. The Abrams turns the buildings to dust, mixing the Russian soldiers with the concrete and bricks. The Ukrainian Abrams crew bravely approaches the Russian soldiers at close range, even though the Russians might have anti-tank weapons with them. Give them a big thumbs up for their courage. Later, the Russians sent another IFV with a group of assault troops. But as soon as the IFV approached the village, it was hit by a Ukrainian drone. As a result, they veered off the road onto the shoulder, abandoned the IFV in panic, and scattered in different directions. Approaching them was a Ukrainian tank. Seeing the abandoned IFV, the tank took a precise shot and destroyed it. The whereabouts of the Russians who scattered are unknown, but the tank continued moving forward and, after a minute, destroyed another Russian IFV that was approaching the village. Thus, the Russian assault was completely repelled. Operators have recently demonstrated their skills in other parts of the front line. After the enemy abandoned their equipment, a Mavic-type drone operator accurately delivered an explosive charge right into the center of the open hatch. At first, we see only smoke, but gradually the fire engulfs the entire tank. And within a few minutes, the ammunition starts to detonate, completely destroying the vehicle. Although the metal structure of the tank is quite strong, the burning temperature of the fuel tank and the ammunition inside will eventually turn it into a mere pile of scrap metal. This explosion of a Russian T-72B3M tank was so powerful that it launched its turret about 250 feet into the air. And this explosion was caused by a small Ukrainian FPV drone. Let's take a closer look at this battle. A Russian tank flees across the field, leaving a trail of smoke and dust behind. It is hit by the first drone, but the tank keeps moving until another FPV catches up with the target and, with a precise strike, triggers an explosion of the fuel tank and ammunition. At that time, there were about 3 reconnaissance drones over the battlefield, allowing us to observe this epic moment of the T-72B3M's destruction from different angles. This episode beautifully illustrates the great power of combining modern technology with the skilled expertise of the pilot. Take a look at this case, for example. A column of Russian military equipment enters a partially destroyed city, thinking that they are not in danger. But in reality, it's a trap. One skillful drone strike not only instantly destroys an enemy tank, but also blocks the road that other vehicles could use to escape from the ambush. Confused Russians from the downed BMP, frightened, refuse to advance. They leave their infantry and the crews of the damaged equipment to their fate and immediately flee into the woods to avoid a second attack. Another FPV drone blows up an APC, just as it approaches its comrades to leave the battlefield. Another tank tried to escape via a different route. Theoretically, it could have succeeded, but in practice, everything turned out differently. This occupier was also unlucky. 2 tanks and 2 infantry fighting vehicles were destroyed by 4 drones. 100% result. Being an FPV drone operator is quite a challenging task, which is why such pilots are highly valued in modern warfare. One of the biggest advantages of these flying birds is that they are quite effective against moving targets, as they can efficiently pursue and strike fast-moving vehicles. To destroy a tank with artillery or other types of weapons, a very complex trajectory must be calculated, but drones can maneuver and change their course, making their attack resemble a hunt. We can witness a fairly successful hunting episode in this video. The Russian T-72B3 Turtle tank tried to evade the Ukrainian armed forces for a long time, but was eventually hit by a pair of drones, causing it to catch fire. A few seconds later, a chain of explosions began inside the tank. One by one, the explosions broke through the protection of the Russian tank, forcing it to slow down and stop. But despite all the damage, the tank continued to move for quite some time. The tank crew partially survived, but they had to stop moving and urgently evacuate the vehicle. However, the tank could not be saved. In the end, another drone effectively and decisively finished it off. The drone operator managed to find a weak spot in the armor and accurately destroy the vehicle. Using drones to attack stationary targets is also effective. No matter how robust the equipment is, it always has weaknesses. And if a tank is stationary, it becomes easier for the operator to hit these vulnerable spots. Even the newest Russian tanks, like the T-80BV can be destroyed with a single strike if you know precisely where to hit. One of the most advanced tanks in service with the Russian Federation is the T-90. Russian propaganda has often claimed that it has no equals in the world. However, as soon as these tanks appeared on the battlefield, Ukrainians found ways to destroy them. In addition to the explosive power of the FPV drone, they also have a significant psychological effect. Sudden attacks from the air can demoralize tank crews, creating a sense of vulnerability and threat that is very difficult to handle when you find yourself trapped in a metal cage. This psychological burden can impact the combat readiness and effectiveness of military units. Relatively inexpensive, mobile, fast, and precise drones have changed the rules of the game since the first days of the war. As soon as drones appeared, military forces on both sides of the conflict began looking for ways to protect themselves from them. The Russians began installing additional armor on the roof to reduce the effectiveness of attacks. However, if a drone operator has already approached the target, it's almost impossible to stop them. Of course, in some cases, this additional armor might help avoid destruction. But this time, the new T-90M lit up like a matchstick from an FPV drone that easily bypassed its defenses. The Russian T-72BM2 differs from the 2011 model by having a larger coverage area of the hull and turret armor with dynamic protection blocks, as well as anti-cumulative rubber textile and lattice screens on the sides and rear, respectively. However, knowing the exact spot to strike, it is possible to destroy even a tank with this type of protection using just a single drone. Watching such videos, one can confidently say that the legend of David and Goliath has long ceased to be a legend and has transformed from a medieval myth into a full-fledged military tactic. These footage was recorded on October 20th during the repulsion of a Russian assault in the Donetsk direction. The soldiers of the 46th Separate Air Assault Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine successfully repelled an attack involving 7 tanks and 11 BMPs. As a result of their combat efforts, the enemy's advance was effectively halted. The Ukrainians halted the Russians halfway to their positions. However, such operations are not simple. Any army in the world has limited resources, and the enemy tries by all available means to preserve every piece of military equipment, inventing new elements of defense. For example, turtle tanks have increasingly appeared, Soviet T-72s fully covered with armor. Such modifications reduce the mobility of the vehicle, but enhance its defensive capability. An FPV pilot must carefully calculate the angle of attack to destroy these tanks. This time, he had to work hard to hit the right spot. In some cases, to destroy such a turtle, it may require the involvement of 2, 3, or even more drones. The Ukrainian kamikaze drone successfully hit a Russian T-72B1 tank of the Turtle modification, which was equipped with a KMT-7 mine trawl. It was a difficult mission, and it took 4 FPV drones to stop this mutant machine. As a result of the attack, the tank was severely damaged, and its ability to perform combat missions was neutralized. War never changes. However, the Ukrainian military constantly discovers new tools for effectively eliminating the occupiers. For example, they use artificial intelligence for automatic targeting of FPV drones in the final seconds before detonation. The drone's processor identifies the target, and even if the signal with the operator is lost, the explosive bird will successfully complete its mission. If the drone is controlled by an experienced pilot, it is sometimes possible to execute very complex maneuvers, not just hitting the tank, but actually flying into its open hatch to inflict maximum damage from the inside. A lot of factors must align for such an operation to be successful. The hatch must be open, the tank must be stationary, and even the weather and wind strength matter. However, in cases where it is achieved, the result is worth all the effort expended. The chances of the tank crew surviving and the machine itself remaining intact in such cases are close to 0. Even if such a cunning maneuver does not lead to the explosion of the ammunition, the fire will do its job. And if there are any doubts, you can always launch another drone to be completely sure of the result. When Russian soldiers abandon their equipment while fleeing the battlefield, the tactics change. FPV drones are very effective weapons, but they are kamikaze drones. Why waste an FPV to finish off equipment that is no longer moving when it's much cheaper to use a regular drone and drop an explosive into the hatch, like in basketball? Ukrainian soldiers would gladly take this abandoned equipment as trophies to repair and use themselves. However, drone operations are often conducted beyond the front line, so it often has to be destroyed instead of captured. This time, Russian soldiers have piled up TM-62 anti-tank mines near an abandoned T-62 tank, and a Ukrainian Mavic 3 drone dropped a shell on them. A dangerous moment as the drone can easily be lost.